Hello, good afternoon. Today, our guest is the distinguished Professor Nancy Segal. Professor Segal is the world's leading expert on twin research and the Professor of Psychology at California State University, Fullerton. Hello, Nancy. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Lipton. How are you?
I'm great. So, Nancy, what is it like to be the world's leading expert on twins?
Well, it's very exciting. I think actually a lot of my colleagues would claim that title as well, but very exciting to be able to do the research and also to communicate it to the public and to write books in the field. So I think I combine the best of many, many different worlds.
All right. We're going to discuss some basic issues. What is a twin?
A twin is somebody who's born with another person who is either exactly like them genetically or is more like a full sibling. The identical twins share all their genes, having split from a single fertilized egg within the first 2 weeks after conception. Fraternal twins result when a woman releases two eggs at the same time, and they're separately fertilized by sperm from the father. So these twins are like ordinary siblings, except that they share the womb and they share their birthday.
What are the different types of twins?
Well, I've just talked about that a little bit. We have identical twins who share all their genes, and we have the fraternal twins who share half their genes on average. But within those two types, you have a number of different variations. For example, within identical twins, about 25% show what we call mirror imaging effects. That is reversals in their hand preference, reversals in their dental structure, perhaps reversals in their facial asymmetries, many, many things. And then within fraternal twins, you can actually have twins with different fathers if a woman has sexual relations with two different men within a 4-day window of opportunity. And we have some twins now who are being called the biracial twins, twins born to a mixed race couple, such that one child looks very, very much like one parent and one looks very much like another parent. And so the two children look like they come from different populations. The term biracial is actually given by the media, and I don't particularly care for it because both twins were equally biracial. They just happen to look quite different. And I have been interviewing some of the parents to understand the parenting challenges as well as the children's different life experiences.
What about MZs and DZs?
Uh-huh. Well, MZs are actually the identical twins. MZ stands for monozygotic. A zygote is a fertilized egg. And so if you say monozygotic, that means one fertilized egg that later divides. When you say dizygotic, that means two zygotes, and that happens when the woman releases the two eggs and they're separately fertilized. So DZ twins are fraternal twins.
Nancy, you have written extensively on twins who were separated at birth, and you also wrote on a controversial decision to separate twins by adoption. Could you tell us a little bit more about these stories?
Okay. Well, these are not just stories, these are hard
It's real.
scientific data, but they come along with stories because each pair has a life that is quite intriguing. But I worked for many years on the Minnesota study of twins raised apart, which was a very comprehensive psychological and medical assessment of adult twins who discovered their twin later in life. And we found enormous similarities within the identical twins, less so among the fraternals. Uh, Most outstanding to me were things like religiosity, how much you invest in religious activities, or social attitudes. These are things we typically thought of as coming from the family, but it turns out they do come partially from the genes. Of course, we found genetic influence on intelligence, on personality, on temperament, on self-esteem, things of that sort, as well as height and weight and brain waves. Now, since leaving Minnesota, I was there for 9 years. I was there from 1982 to 1991. And since leaving there, I started some studies of twins raised apart here in California. So right now I have a very fascinating study of young Chinese twins who were adopted separately because of the one child policy that was in effect from about 1980 till 2018. And so these are twins adopted by different families, most of them who met by chance, and I've been studying them on multiple occasions. Occasionally, I come across a case of twins raised apart, and I've written those up as well as to the extent that I can. I can't do everything, but I try to do as much as I possibly can. These twins raised apart are rare, and they're enormously informative because identical twins raised apart in different environments are often very, very similar, much more so than, say, fraternal twins raised together. And that's a very intriguing finding. So we know that genetic effects are everywhere. They affect every measured behavior, but just some more and some less. Oh, you also wanted to know about the intentionally separated twins in the controversial New York City study. Now, that's all in my 2021 book called Deliberately Divided. And that was a horrific, controversial study where there was an adoption consultant, Louise, at the Louise Wise Adoption Agency. Her name was Dr. Viola Bernard. She was a Columbia University psychiatrist, and she felt the twins should be separated to give them a chance to develop identity and not overburden the parents. And then her colleague, Dr. Peter Neubauer, who ran the Child Development Center in the 60s in New York City, decided that he would study these twins over time. It would be the first prospective study of twins raised apart where you began it at a very young age. Now, that was the conventional wisdom, that she had the idea, or she had the justification and he had the idea. But having done all this research, it's published in a very tight volume, I am not so sure. He always wanted to study twins raised apart. It could be that he had the idea and then justification came later. But I researched every single pair of twins in that study. I have looked at the findings that I can, and I've written a lot about the ethics and legalities of that circumstance.
That's quite interesting. Obviously, Nancy, you are familiar with the case of the Jim twins. Every now and then, when I'm online, people make reference to that story, but they don't remember the names of the twins. Could you tell us a little about that story?
Yeah. Well, Jim Lewis and Jim Springer were actually the first pair of twins that launched the Minnesota study of twins raised apart. They were brought up by different families in Ohio, living maybe 30, 40 miles apart. And one family had no knowledge that they were raising a twin. The other one did learn that when she was filing some legal papers. And her son initially had no interest in finding his brother, but eventually did. So they were reunited at age 39. And they had a very long list of similarities that were quite amazing. They both bit their nails down to the nubs. They both had a mixed headache syndrome that developed in their teens. They both gained weight at the same point in time without any change in lifestyle or diet. They both drove light blue Chevrolets. They both vacationed on the same 3-block strip of beach in Florida. They both used to scatter love letters to their wives around the house, and they both named their sons James Allen. So they had a lot of similarities, and the more unusual the similarities, the more we can say that they may have a genetic basis. Now, you may say, how does a name have a genetic basis, or how does nail biting have a genetic basis? Well, nail biting is a nervous habit, and so this is certainly something that might have a partial genetic basis. And naming your son James Allen could be a reflection of respect for tradition, naming a first son after the father. Maybe they like the sound of the name. We don't know for sure, but the point is that when we find these similarities in identical twins raised apart, and not so much in fraternal twins raised apart, this gives us some clue as to how they originate.
And again, recently I read an article published in the Daily Mail, and you were cited. In this article, the Daily Mail covered the story of two women who were adopted by different families, and one lady, she had a condition. So because of her condition, her mother decided to keep her. That this was featured in the Daily Mail on July 1, 2024, and you were
I'd have, to,
cited.
I'd have to know more about that case.
Yeah,
Do you know the names of the twins?
the twins. Yeah, yeah, it's right in front of me. So Anne Hunt and Elizabeth Amel.
I don't think I know that pair. I think I was probably quoted for commentary, but when you have a chance, Lipton, send me that article. I'd like
Yeah,
to
yeah,
see it.
yeah. Because you know what's interesting is that you're sitting. Well, you're not sitting. You're standing in the middle between. You're standing in the middle, and both women are at
Wait,
your side. One that's
tell,
at your left,
tell me,
one's to your right.
tell me the names again.
Yeah, Anne Hunt and Elizabeth Amel.
Oh, it's the pronunciation.
Yeah.
I know who they are, of course. Now, these are fraternal twins, and they met for the first time at the age of 78. And in fact, I consult for Guinness World Records, and it turns out that they are the longest, they have the longest separation time of any pair of twins. Now, if you look at the current Guinness World Records 2025, you will see them entered in there, but you'll also see a kind of postscript where there was a pair of twins that claimed to be separated for 90 years. And we haven't been able to confirm that. So until we can, Anne and Elizabeth hold the record. Unfortunately, Anne and Elizabeth are no longer alive, but I was very lucky to meet
When
them.
did they
And I,
die?
when did they die? Um, well, Elizabeth died, I don't know, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and Anne maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, because this story is cited as July 1, 2024. Maybe I
Well,
didn't
that's,
read all of it, but they are
yeah,
not listed as deceased.
well, they are. Trust me.
Yeah, they're not listed as deceased. But
Yeah.
Nancy, are you a twin?
Am I a twin? Yes, I am. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I'm a fraternal twin. I have a sister, and that, in fact, Lipton, is how I got interested in the field because I was so obsessed with our differences. I used to think as a child, how can we be in the same family with the same parents and same experiences and be so different? And as I got older and I began to take psychology courses, I was very interested in human behavior. I realized that genetics had a lot to do with it, that we were just two ordinary siblings that happened to be born together.
All right. And you are a professor. I read an article on your twin sister. I read an article chronicling the experiences of you and your twin sister, and you are listed as not being studious.
As not being
Studious. So your
serious.
sister is listed as being a studious person, but I'm saying
Oh,
Nancy's a professor.
well, everything is a matter of degree. I'm very serious about my work, but I also like to have fun as well. So I like to go dancing. I like movies. I like to be with friends. So I have a whole social side, like most people do.
Yeah.
I think that for academics, if you work too hard, you become stale and you don't come to your work with a fresh perspective. So I try to keep a nice balance in my life.
Okay. And do we have any data for that assertion that if you become too serious as an academic over time, you lose your energy and zest? Have you
Well,
seen any studies on that topic?
that's a very good question. And I don't know offhand, but what I can tell you is that when I talk to my colleagues who've retired, some of them give exactly that reason for their retirement.
Yeah. Well, I interview academics, and sometimes I send out emails to academics who are distinguished but really old, like in their 80s and 90s, and they're reluctant to come on the show. Some of them say, I need to learn something new. I haven't studied anything new in a long time. Or they used to like research, but then their editor died and they're just reluctant to talk.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that. I have no interest in retirement. I just got 2 new book contracts that I'm very excited about. And so, yeah, I've got studies going on. I have students to mentor. So, yeah, courses to teach. So, and I have conferences for travel. I just got back from Italy, in fact, 2 days ago. And I was attending the International Twin Congress in Assisi, Italy. And it's a wonderful organization that brings together researchers in many, many fields. And you exchange ideas and develop collaborations and new lifelong friends.
Because you're so immersed in your research, probably it's time for you to look at it from a different perspective. How do twins approach retirement? Because retirement is really a contentious issue these days. Some people work hard to retire, others say that there is life after retirement. You're not interested in retirement. What are the factors that shape how people view retirement genetically. I think that's an interesting area of research. You could take it up.
Yeah, yeah. I have to do a twin study. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
just speaking from personal experience and the experiences of some colleagues, I think that it's a matter of finding new areas that interest you that are related. I mean, I always study twins, but I find new aspects to study that maybe I didn't think about. So that keeps everything fresh and lively. And as I said, to maintain a balance in life where you do work hard and play hard, I think is very, very important. So I would say those two things. And I think always having things to look forward to is important. So, a conference, a trip, someplace wonderful, things like that. And I think buying yourself nice things, I do that and on my poor academic salary, but it helps. What can I say?
Well, poor academic salary. There's this paper I plan to read. It's titled, Do Elite Universities Pay Their Professors Too Much Money? I plan to read it at some point.
Well, it depends on the university. It really does. Salaries vary all over the place, and some people just want more money than others. As long as I'm comfortable, I don't need to be rich.
Well, I respect your opinion, but I think I want to be rich.
Well, I respect your opinion too. I just don't
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, I know. I need to have my penthouse in New York, and I love research. If I were to make a lot of money, I would sponsor research. I'm really passionate about academics and science.
Uh-huh.
So, Nancy, some person they have used your research to explain genetics by arguing that the environment does not matter as much. Do you?
That I don't agree with that at all. The environment matters a great deal. And especially if you look at very extreme environments, they can overwhelm genetically based differences. I studied twins. Is a fascinating situation in Colombia, South America, where two sets of identical male twins were switched at birth. So a pair born in Bogota and a pair born in a small rural area up in the north. And when one baby had to come at a day of age to Bogota for a better hospital, they accidentally switched him with one of the other twins a week later when he was brought home. And they grew up as two, thinking they were fraternal twins, one in the city and one in the country, but they were really unrelated. And we found, contrary to what we saw in Minnesota, that the ones raised together, even though they were unrelated, they were more alike in ability because they had more similar schooling. Whereas the ones up north didn't go past fifth grade, which is a very extreme environment. And so they ended up being more alike too. I was surprised by that finding, but it does show that environment makes a big difference. And, by changing an environment, you can modify a behavior. Uh, some behaviors are more susceptible to environmental modification than others, but that's just what the research shows.
And how important is the role of genes?
Oh, you mean G for general intelligence?
Not
So,
general intelligence, as in genetics, genes. We're going to talk about
oh,
general
genes.
intelligence
Oh,
later.
well, yeah. Well, genes definitely play a role, and they affect just about every behavior, physical trait, disease that we can study. Very few things have been found that don't have genetic influence. I can think of two. One was love styles. If you fall in love quickly or slowly, doesn't seem to have a genetic effect. And at my conference that I was at last week, there was somebody who reported about getting a tattoo. And it seems that because so many people get tattoos now, there seems to be no genetic effect. Probably if she'd measured that 20 years ago, there would have been.
Yes.
But most things do have a partial genetic basis. And I think it's good to know where things come from. It certainly means that environment matters. It means parenting matters. I think that parents have the responsibility to be attentive to their children, to figure out what children do well, and really nurture their abilities and interests.
Now we're going to talk about your most recent paper based on my knowledge. My knowledge could be limited, but it is entitled Developmental Trends in Intelligence Revisited with Novel Kinships.
Okay, what do you want to
Yeah,
know?
yeah, I want to talk about IQ because this paper made the rounds on social media.
Oh, it
And
did?
yes, yes,
I, I didn't even know that.
yes. So
I hope,
people have been saying that your paper is an indication that IQ is primarily genetic and the environment is not that important.
that's a real misreading of that paper. And first of all, I'm hardly the first person to talk about genetic influences on intelligence. There's many, many, many papers before mine that do the same thing. I just show it in a somewhat different way because I use three novel kinships. But to say the environment doesn't matter, it's just such a misreading of that paper. I don't understand where people come from with that. The environment showed up in everything. Um, the three novel kinships were the young Chinese twins raised apart. Actually, there were I repeated the IQ testing on two occasions. So and the samples were slightly different across the two. So in the first one, there were the young Chinese twins raised apart, and there was a group of Chinese twins raised together, and a pair, and then pairs of what I call virtual twins, same age, unrelated children raised together, who replicate twinship without the genetic link. And so what I found on the first testing was that the twins raised apart showed a good amount of similarity. The reared together showed much more. These were young kids, probably had more similar educations and things like that. And the virtual twins, even though were raised together, were very, very different. And when I studied them a second time, about 4 or 5 years later, the Chinese twins raised apart got much more similar, even though they were apart, which means that there were new genetic factors in common that were probably kicking in. But it wasn't perfect similarity by any means. And then I had a contrast group of adult reared apart twins, and they went up just a little bit over time, but I wouldn't expect much because their adults and intelligence levels stabilized. But those virtual twins who were raised together, who were unrelated, went down a great deal. And that's probably because genetics kicked in for them, just like it did for the twins. Only the twins, it made them more alike. In the case of the virtual twins, it made them more different.
Nancy, I really love your energy. And because you're so willing to tackle new topics, I have another question. This is a bit of a deviation. But is there a relationship between twinning rates and socioeconomic status? Are rich people more likely to have twins? Are poor people more likely to have twins?
I saw one study once that showed some kind of a socioeconomic influence. And, it was such an old study, I can't even remember which way it went. I would guess that twinning might be more prevalent among higher socioeconomic classes, just because twinning is rather a high risk pregnancy. More things can go wrong with twins than with single kids. And so people with more money, higher socioeconomic status can afford to have better medical care and things of that. And sometimes older women will delay the childbearing years to establish themselves professionally and educationally. And so when they want to have kids, they're no longer really able to easily. So they do assisted reproductive technology or in vitro fertilization. And that can be very expensive.
Interesting. But I would love for you to do some more research on the topic. I want to read your studies on twinning
I,
rates.
I have enough research, thank you, to do. I have
Okay.
plenty of projects without you giving me more.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, then. There one academic now deceased. He was interested in the link between twinning and what we now refer to as life history strategy in research, life history strategy. So J. Philip Houston, he used to write quite a bit on those topics.
Yeah,
And yeah, some people argue that twin twin twinning rates are an indication of a faster life history strategy. And for our listeners who are not familiar with with that concept, life history, it literally like in Jamaica, there's a song, live fast, die young, where the entertainer, yes. So when we say that one of the fast life history strategy, it
I
literally
understand.
means that the ecology is more
Right.
unstable. These people, they're more present oriented because of the unstable ecology. So some of them, they literally have a live fast, die young mentality
Yeah,
because the possibility of them living to 70, 80
yeah,
is really minute. Yes.
I understand. All I can say is that there are many, many factors that affect twinning: the mother's age, the mother's weight, the family history of twinning. I couldn't just pin it down to one thing like a life history strategy. There's many, many things that affect twinning. So that's all I'm going to say on it at this point.
So Nancy, what are you working on currently?
Well, I'm currently working on my two books, my new books, and I'm working on a study of whether the twins. I'm looking at the drawings, the evaluation of twins' drawings and how sophisticated they are, and whether you can predict an IQ from that. Some people think you can. I don't know the answer to that question yet. I'm also working on a study of problem behaviors in twins, comparing twins raised together and virtual twins. So if you think about that, identical twins share genes and environment, and virtual twins only their environment. So that's another project I'm working on. I work on the influence or the consequences of losing a twin. Is that the same or different for identical and fraternals? I have studies on look-alike people who look alike but aren't related,
Yes,
and
yes.
how similar they are in personality, and do they get along, and things like that. So I have many, many projects taking place right now.
Wow, I'm really interested in the lookalike research.
Well, I can tell you it's still ongoing, but I published a paper on this about 5, 6 years ago, and the lookalikes are, are very different in personality. In fact, the correlation is probably close to zero. And most of them don't get along. I wouldn't say they fight, but they just are not very close. I think people come to this with an expectation that they're going to find their long lost twin. They just don't.
All right. So twins and the misconceptions. I don't want to sound silly. I've never believed in it, but when you're a twin, do you have the ability to read your twin's mind?
Absolutely not. There's no such thing as telepathy. I don't think for twins or anybody else. The data just aren't there. But what I think happens is that identical twins particularly express these ESP-like events. So they know each other very well. They respond to the world the same way. They have similar ideas about things. And I think that gives you the idea that they have this. Now, some twins will say, well, the telephone rings and I just know it's my twin. But if you call each other 10 times a day, the chances are pretty high it's going to be your twin when the phone rings.
I love that response. You're able to identify the pattern. So if I know that Nancy should call me at 12, when she calls at 12, I'm going to know that it's Nancy. I think
Right.
that's just common sense. Do
Yeah.
twins skip a generation?
No, they could, but there's no rule about that. Some people think fraternal twins skip a generation. They can, but there's no rule about that.
And what are some of the other popular misconceptions that I'm leaving out?
Um, well, some people think that twins should always be separated in school. And I don't think, again, there should be any rule about it. I think they should just be separated if it's good for them and keep together if it's good for them. You just make a decision as you go along. Another misconception is that twins are always going to be the same. And even identical twins can differ in many, many different ways, and fraternal twins can be alike. So it just varies. And I think some people think that if one identical twin gets a disease, the other will too. When actually there's more difference in that than you would imagine. So lots of misconceptions.
I'm interested the in their preference for colors. So sometimes twins tend to dress alike. Why is this so?
Well, that's a good question. And think about yourself, the kinds of clothes you buy. Now, what goes into that? What you can afford, what looks good on you, what colors look good on you, what kind of fabrics you like, something warm, something not so warm, something itchy. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people do what they do. And all these things probably at some level have some genetic component. I know that I'm very careful never to buy anything in wool because I know it itches me to death. But for some people, they don't even notice. So that would be a consideration. Some people like to be very fashionable. Some people just wear, anything, doesn't matter. In fact, I'm doing a study now with colleagues in the US and in England, and we're going to do probably the first study on twins' fashion preferences. So I'm very excited about that.
Nancy, I think that there's a possibility that we're intellectual twins, me and you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that,
I
please?
said I think that there is a possibility that we are intellectual twins, me and you.
Oh, well, I've been told that many times.
Really? Yes, because I am thinking about these issues too. Why do twins like a particular color? I'm interested in writing styles. I read a study, and the researcher was evaluating talent in a particular family and how you can
Uh,
study the writing style to indicate talent. And he was pondering the genetics of writing styles and their relationship to talent.
do you mean writing style in terms of whether they use lots of big words or something like that, or do you mean writing
The
style
structure,
in the handwriting?
and
What do you mean?
writing and structure, but it was
Oh,
mostly the structure.
well, I had these twins from Bogota that I told you about, the switched at birth. I had their handwriting analyzed, and there wasn't a great deal that came out from that. Um, yeah,
I,
so just a color preference study would be interesting, I think. But I think it's more interesting when it comes to fashion. You can study more things that way.
yeah, fashion. And fashion is an indication of one's personality.
Oh, sure,
Yeah, some
sure.
people like brighter clothing,
Right,
some people are
right,
dull.
right, exactly. Yeah. And some people like to have the latest fashion, some people could care less.
Yeah, like, are you a fashionable person? I could care less.
Um, I'm more fashionable than not caring less. Yes.
Yeah, like if we look, if we were in a different era, different time, I would buy the same shirt and wear it to work every day. Some would say
Well,
that, yes, some would say that that's the sign of autism, but I am not particularly fashionable. But though I'm not fashionable, I am usually properly dressed because of family upbringing. My relatives, my parents, they care about attire and fashion.
yeah,
So
I understand.
that's why I am socialized to be properly dressed. But I could care less about fashion.
Yeah. Um, so I'm noticing that the time is about 4:30. I don't know how long you want to go, but I do need to do a couple of things. So,
Okay, well, thanks for your time. Well, I'm in Europe, so it's like 12 a.m. my time, 12:30.
oh, really?
Yes.
12:30? Oh my goodness, that's late for you. It's only
Yeah,
4:30 here.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but we'll definitely keep in touch. I would love to work as their assistant.
A lot of people would. So,
Wow, everybody wants to work with your celebrity.
they want to work with twins. So, when will this be aired? Where do you put this?
I'm going to put it on YouTube.
Okay,
So I'll send you a link. And thanks
that'd be
again
nice.
for coming on. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.